Thanks, Ken. And he did corral me at the meeting 2 weeks ago. And just to fill in some of the information, I actually got to Flagstaff in August. I started teaching just this past August at NAU, and I got there the day before I had to start work. So I'm still trying to catch up as a result. And I'm really glad that it's the start of March break, so I might be able to do some catching up. But anyway, I'm here today. I want to talk to you a little bit about Belize, especially since a bunch of you guys are going to be going. And I move around. My ears are still popping coming down the mountain. The one good thing, though, about coming down from Flagstaff, I think I mentioned to somebody, you can put your car in neutral and then just cruise. So yeah, save a lot of gas on that way. But anyway, guys, what I'm going to do tonight is show you some slides first on some of the surface sites in western Belize, because I am almost certain that those of you going to Belize will be going to western Belize. It is, in spite of the fact that somebody in the audience might not agree with me because her family comes from Belize City, western Belize is like western U.S. is the best part of the country. And it was where I was born, and that's where I do all my archaeological research. But anyway, without much ado, just in case you guys don't know where the hell Belize is, follow the yellow arrows and you can figure it out. The one thing that's pretty obvious is there's a lot more green down in Belize than in Arizona. In fact, I remember when I first came for my job interview and I landed in Phoenix, I was going, there's something wrong. And it's like, yeah, it's all brown. But it was pleasant. It was a pleasant surprise as I got up to Flagstaff. But anyway, so there's Belize right on the Caribbean Sea, famous for having the second longest barrier reef in the world, second only to Australia. But we also have lots of archaeological sites. Belize is an important part, we like to think the most important part of the Maya world. And indeed, many discoveries in Belize have put Belize on the map as either some of the earliest remains of the ancient Maya, some of the most awesome caves, as you will see in a little while, and also some great archaeology. And today I'm going to share with you, some of the sites in western Belize there. This is a close-up. That's the Guatemalan border right there. And you have the two main branches of the Belize River. And Cajalpech is where I presently conduct a lot of my research, but I've worked also at Caracol, at Xunantunich, and on a site called Baking Pot. And if you go to western Belize, like I said, I'm almost certain, make sure they take you to Cajalpech, or I'll come back and beat you. But no bias, of course. So there's Cajalpech, and I'm sure you'll go to Xunantunich too, and Caracol is also awesome. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to show you some imagery, some slides of those sites that I had the incredible privilege of working. As Ken said in the introduction, I used to teach at the University of New Hampshire, and in 1999, the then Minister of Tourism and Culture for Belize called me and invited me to go down to Belize to do this tourism development project. Belize was interested in developing some of its archaeological sites for tourism, for their tourism potential. And we were sort of latecomers to this game. Mexico and Guatemala were, years ahead of us. So I just couldn't refuse. As an archaeologist, and I'm sure there are several of you in the audience here, if somebody tells you, guess what? We're going to give you, a few $1 million and you can go excavate and conserve some of the biggest sites in the country. It's a no-brainer, right? So I took 2 years leave of absence from the University of New Hampshire, and I went down, and then I found out it was going to be a 4-year project, and I was like, oh gosh, what am I going to do here? And tried to extend my leave, but the university said, no, we need you back. And it was one of the hardest decisions I made. But I decided to stay in Belize and promised my wife, don't worry, we'll go back up to the States, one of these days. And 14 years later, thankfully she's from Montana, and those Montana women are tough. And she worked with me at all these sites. But anyway, so that's sort of the story of how I ended up going back to Belize. And then last year I decided, okay, it's time to go back, or Micah is going to divorce me or get rid of me or whatever. And got lucky and I got the job at NAU. But anyway, back to Belize, and especially Western Belize. And one of the first places, like I said, I'm going to take you is the site of Caracol, which is right there. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours drive from San Ignacio town. And Caracol has been the focus of research activity by two very close friends and colleagues of mine, Arlen and Diane Chase, that work at the University of Central Florida. But like I said, between 2001 and 2004, as the director of this big project, I also did some work at Caracol where we were excavating and conserving a lot of the buildings. So here was where our camp is. It was like, we used to call it the Caracol Hilton. Of course, you couldn't get any cold beer unless you brought it yourself, but we did have a couple freezers, but we were not allowed to use those freezers for anything else other than food, because you had to bring in everything, like I said, for 2 hours back here. But anyway, so there's the camp, and we started to excavate and conserve some of the large architecture. Caracol is an awesome site. It certainly ranked among the top, political players in the ancient Maya world, with other sites like Tikal in Guatemala, Calakmul in Campeche, or Chichen Itza in Yucatan, etc. But Chichen is much later. Caracol was certainly one of those dominant sites. Lots of beautiful carved monuments that talk about its conflicts and wars with places like Tikal, and also alliances it made with Calakmul. This is the A Plaza here with an Eastern group that served for astronomical purposes back in its heyday. This is another view taken from a helicopter of that A group with some of the other pyramids that we excavate and partly conserved. One of the reasons for the partial conservation is because my approach was, if I could not understand the architecture, I was not going to reconstruct it. So I tried to conserve what I found. And you will see, a fair bit of that. One of the main sort of achievements we certainly had at Caracol was the excavation and conservation of the site's largest pyramidal building. This structure is about 150 feet tall. And I remember walking up these steps. That's all there was in January of 2001. We had just finished building the camp. And I remember walking up with this colleague of mine, and I stopped in the middle, because that's just the middle. There's still stuff on top. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? What the hell am I doing? I've never excavated anything half the size of this. And graduate school does not teach you anything about good conservation of monumental architecture. Like I said, this thing's a behemoth. So I figured out the way I was going to do it. I put blinders right there, or you can take your cap and just put the cap right there. And I said I'm going to tackle the lower 1/3 first, then I'll move up to the second, or the midsection, and then I'll move up to the top section. And that's exactly what we did. So in January, we started excavating, conserving the base. And those are guys down there, by the way, if you want some idea of scale. All right? There are two guys standing right there. And so then we were just completing that, then moving up to the midsection, then before tackling the upper section. And I had actually almost 100 workers. And we would work 20 days nonstop. And I remember saying to the guys, if you're a Christian, you're just going to have to say your prayers on the building. It works 20 days straight, and then we'd take 10 days off and go into town. And you know what archaeologists do after 20 days in the bush. And we finished this excavation and conservation in exactly 377 days. I wanted to do it within the year, but we lost 10 days. And that's sort of the end of that work. And again, you can see there's somebody for scale. So just massive, massive building. And one of these days, if I come back, I can talk more about Maya architecture and some of the interesting things about it. There's a structure right across from it, from this large pyramid building, and it has some awesome stucco masks. And one of the things that we've been doing in Belize, in fact, we're probably at the forefront